It all started with a mirror, not the one hanging in the bathroom, the one in other people's eyes. When you're 6 and running down the daycare hallway in pajamas with bunnies, you don't yet know you're not pretty. You're just happy, light, until you hear behind your back, "Her face looks like a hamster, and her nose like it never grew in, and her ears like a doll from a flea market." I didn't realize they were talking about me. I just got quiet. For some reason, I wanted to bury my face in a pillow and never come out. Since then, I started fearing mirrors. Not literally, but every glance at my reflection felt like a test. One I had already failed. My name was Grace Ellery. Yes, Grace, as in blessing. But as my mom used to say, there was nothing graceful about me. She had me late. My dad left early. Mom, a tough woman, a former nurse, now cleaned a supermarket at night. We lived in a trailer on the edge of Livingston, Montana. There were 3 diners, 1 church, and 1,000 opinions on how a girl should look, and I didn't match any of them. Cheeks, round, lips, thin, eyes, too deep set, hair, neither here nor there. Figure, back forward, chest back, knees seemed embarrassed of each other, and most of all, a face that everyone, for some reason, wanted to fix. At school, no one bullied me outright. I wasn't the one they tormented. I was the one they ignored. Not picked for teams, not invited to dances. I always sat by the window, the corner. The light hit from the side, less to see. One boy, his name was Scott, once passed by and said, "You're so weird, not ugly, but not pretty either. Just no, just no." That phrase sunk into me like a nail in a wall, not sticking out, but stopping anything bright from being hung there. I grew up feeling like I could be smart, funny, kind if needed, but not someone whose face anyone would want to look at for more than 5 seconds. I learned to hide, not literally, in clothes, in words, in irony, in "I don't care," but still I couldn't stop wondering, what if I were different? But fate, it doesn't ask, it just whispers in your ear at an old bus stop. You think you don't belong, but you're just not standing in the right place yet. I was 17, cleaning up after my shift at a cheap diner where I worked after school. My uniform stained, hair in a bun, the smell of grease soaked into my skin, and then she walked in, a woman in a gray coat, slim, with tired eyes. She didn't sit down, just ordered tea, and watched for a long time, like she didn't see the dirty apron, only something else. What, I didn't know. She came up and asked, "Are those your photographs on the board by the register?" Yes, I blushed. "I sometimes shoot nature, just a hobby." "You know," she said, "you have a face you can't look away from." I laughed, tired, sarcastic. "Well, that's a first." She didn't laugh. "I'm an art director at an independent studio. We're looking for a face for a portrait series. Not pretty, real. Grace, I'd like to offer you a shoot." At first I thought, prank, then scam. But something stirred inside me because this woman wasn't trying to convince me. She simply spoke a truth she already believed in. I said, yes. And that's how the story began. One I would never have believed, a story where just no turns into can't look away, where a non-photogenic face becomes the face of a fashion campaign that doesn't use Photoshop, where a girl from a trailer becomes a symbol that being yourself isn't a failure, it's a path. But back then, in that diner, standing with a wet rag in my hand and a drop of sauce on my cheek, I didn't know yet. I may never be beautiful to everyone, but one day I would be myself, and that would be enough to be remembered. They shot her on an old camera, not an iPhone, not some high-end gear that makeup artists fight over at fashion shows, just a basic DSLR with a white sheet stretched in the background and light from a window. The studio was set up in what used to be a warehouse, concrete floor, exposed wiring on the walls, the smell of dust and coffee, no glass partitions, no loud brand names, no gloss. She sat on a wooden chair in her favorite gray t-shirt, the one her mother used to wear, and jeans worn out at the knees. "We'll start like this," said the woman, Carla, the art director. No makeup, just your face, as it is, okay? Grace nodded, but everything inside her resisted. No makeup wasn't about cosmetics. It meant no hiding, no softening, no covering. The first shots, awkward. Shoulders tense, eyes looking away, like she wanted to say, let's just get this over with. I know I don't fit. The photographer didn't direct her. He didn't say, smile, turn your head, give me emotion. He just clicked, quietly, almost rhythmically, like a metronome, as if waiting, not for a good shot, but for that moment when she would stop thinking of herself as someone wrong. After half an hour, Carla came over, handed her the camera. Take a look. Grace took it with trembling hands and froze. On the screen, it was her, tired, with eyes that weren't performing, with lips that didn't know the perfect shape, with a collarbone that jutted from her neck. And in that, there was something unbearably honest, something that made her want to look away, and then look again, because this face wasn't asking for approval, it just existed. Why did you choose me? She asked, not taking her eyes off the photos. Carla sat down next to her. Because you're not a product, you're a reminder that not everyone needs to change to be seen. Sometimes it's enough just not to disappear. There were more shots after that, in different light, against a wall, with a scarf in her hair, with wind from the window. All unfiltered. Not a single photo hid the imperfections, not a pimple, not the curve of her nose, not the asymmetry of her lips. Everything stayed, and all of it worked. These shots will be part of an exhibition project, Carla said. It's called Real Raw, and your portrait will be in the center, without a label, because there's no need to explain why people want to look at it. When Grace returned home, the bus rocked her along the same roads she had taken for years, not as someone, as no one. And everything seemed the same, but inside, the pain was gone. Only a quiet knowing remained. They didn't try to change me, they didn't decorate me, they saw me. And that was the first time. The photo was published on a Monday, no caption, no backdrop, just the shot. A face slightly turned to the left, eyes looking past the lens, light falling across the cheek, leaving a soft shadow on the temple. Skin unfiltered, not smoothed, lips with a little crack, a hint of sleeplessness under the eyes. And all of it, filling the frame, not glossy, not pretty, honest. The post caption was brief. We've gotten used to loving only what's been edited, but real strength lies not in correction, but in acceptance. This is Grace, and you will remember her. In the first hour, 1,000 likes, then 10,000, and then it kept growing. Shares, comments, discussions. She sat on the floor of her room, in the same trailer, in the same pajamas, staring at her phone screen, her face visible to everyone. That used to scare her more than the dark. But now there was a strange calm, not joy, not pride, just acceptance, like everything had already happened and she hadn't gotten lost. But with attention came an old acquaintance, a comment under the photo. She's not pretty, but there's something about her. Classic case, they found someone unusual, called her deep, but really she's just ugly with sad eyes. This is the new face of fashion? Horrible, the era of no taste has begun, and someone from school, a former classmate, posted a story, opening Grace's photo and writing, when ugly becomes trendy, the world's gone mad. They sent it to her, a lot of people. Did you see this? Isn't that Laura from 11B? Oh, wait, Grace. I thought she moved to Kansas to work in a warehouse. She didn't respond, just scrolled, not like a victim, not with, what if they're right, but like someone who finally understood other people's opinions. They're not a verdict, they're background noise. Her mom noticed the shift. Are they mocking you again? No, Grace said. Now they're just confused. What do you mean? They don't know how to react. Before, it was easy, I was nobody, period. But now it's, she's not pretty. But, and that but scares them because it breaks the pattern. She turned off her phone, went outside, sat on the bench by the school, the same one she used to hide behind during recess. where she listened to music through headphones and pretended it didn't hurt. A girl approached, a younger student, not one of the trend followers, just messy hair, giant backpack. "Is that you?" she asked. "They showed you on Miss Grant's tablet. They said you're a real face, and I'm not pretty either." Grace looked at her. "Who told you that?" "Everyone, but I still love my face. It's mine. And when I saw you, I realized you can be different and still be beautiful. Just your own kind of beautiful." Grace sat beside her. "You're not pretty. You just haven't gotten used to yourself yet. And people confuse unfamiliar with ugly." They sat in silence. Then the girl stood up and said, "I want to be remembered someday too, not for how I look, but for what's inside." Grace smiled. "Trust me, if you don't change who you are, they will remember you, not quickly, but for real." That evening, she posted a photo on her own profile, not from a professional shoot, an old one. She was 15, in pajamas, hair a mess, and the caption, "All my life they told me I wasn't pretty. Now they say, not pretty, but, but I'm just Grace, no but, no filter, and that's enough." And this time, the comments were different. "I'm Grace too, just had a different name. I'm crying because I saw myself in this. Now I'll look in the mirror differently." And she realized sometimes to change how beauty is seen, you just have to endure and never apologize for how you look. Don't explain, don't adjust, just be. Of course, here's the English translation of your story, preserving the structure and paragraph breaks exactly as in the original. You really agreed? Carla looked at her with a hint of worry in her eyes. "This isn't an exhibition. It's a runway show. People, flashes, critics, stylists with sharp elbows. They're not always kind. Aren't you scared?" Grace was sitting on the edge of the studio couch, twisting her backpack strap between her fingers. Inside, everything protested and feared and whispered, "You're not made for this. Leave while you still can." But all of it already sounded distant, because something else, quiet but strong, sat just beneath her sternum and answered, "I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing it for the girl who'll open a magazine tomorrow, see me, and realize she can step out of the corner too." They got her ready in silence. No makeup, at her request, light foundation, no mascara. Her hair was simply brushed and left loose. "Are you sure?" the makeup assistant whispered. "Usually models, well, I'm not usual," Grace said softly but firmly. "I'm different." The dress was simple, dusty blue, no neckline, no slit, complex shape with soft folds at the shoulders and a wide belt. It didn't fit her perfectly. It moved, lived with her, slid across her, not accentuating, not flaunting, not screaming, but not hiding either. "Nothing fits her," someone muttered backstage. "Too plain." "She doesn't even have posture." Carla heard it. She walked over and whispered to her, "They want form, but you have substance. Hold on." When it was her turn, the room was dim. The light fell strictly on the runway. The first step, heavy. The second, like moving through clay. But the third was hers. She didn't walk like a model or like an actress. She just walked, as she was, straight, slowly, without posing, without gloss, with eyes that didn't ask, "How do I look?" but answered, "Here I am, and I'm not apologizing for it." And that's what stopped everyone. At that moment, there was no applause. But the silence in the hall was so deep, every breath became loud. She reached the end of the runway, turned around, and looked into the crowd. Director, brave, not defiant, but honest. And one of the audience members, a critic, a woman in her 50s with a short haircut and a notebook, suddenly put down her pen and said aloud, "Finally, someone walked out here as a person, not a brand." After the show, people came up to her. Not designers, not photographers, people. A young woman with extra weight, a man in a wheelchair, a teenager with acne, a girl with a balding head. Each of them said the same thing in different words: "Thank you for not being ashamed to be real, because now I'm not afraid either." Later, in the dressing room, she overheard two models whispering, "Still, She's not pretty. Yeah, but did you notice? You couldn't look away from her. And in that moment, Grace realized she had become something you couldn't comment on in the usual way, because no dress fit her, except for the truth. And truth always provokes either love or fear, and in both cases, attention. That evening, she sat at the train station, waiting for her train, wrapped in that same blue fabric. Next to her, a thermos of tea. On her back, a backpack. In her mind, not dizziness from success, but calm. And at one point, lifting her head, she caught the gaze of a girl in the window. The girl looked at her intently, with interest, not recognizing her, but as if recognizing herself in her. And that meant more than any show, because that gaze said, "You gave me permission, not to be beautiful, but to be free." 2 days had passed since the show. Grace's phone was blowing up, at first, hesitantly, then persistently, then aggressively. Messages from strangers, offers from editors, DMs from stylists who'd never even liked her photos were now writing, "You're just wow. You're the new face of fashion. We need to talk, urgently." She didn't rush, not out of arrogance, out of caution, because she knew, in a world where you were once ignored, sudden attention can be a trap. Like you've spent your whole life in the dark, and suddenly someone points a spotlight at you, not because they love you, but because now it's convenient. On the third day, she was invited to the main office of a fashion magazine, the very one that only ever featured cheekbones, perfect jawlines, lips, and the face that sells. "Grace," said the editor-in-chief, a woman in a sharp black suit with manicured hands and a voice trained over years of giving commands. "We want you to be the cover feature, a full spread, an interview, a photo series." She looked at her carefully, with gratitude, but also with a question. "Why me?" The editor set aside her tablet. "Because you're real. Because people are talking about you. Because people look at you and can't agree, are you beautiful or not? And that's perfect. You're viral, you're complex, you're human, and we need that in our frame. Just one little thing, we'd like to tweak the style a bit, makeup, hair, a bit of retouching on the skin, just a little. The face shape is great, just need to balance it for the cover, make it more harmonious." Grace listened in silence, almost expressionless, as if she'd heard this before. "So, in other words," she said calmly, "you want me to be real, but look convenient." The editor frowned slightly. "No, no, you misunderstood. You'll still be you, just with the right presentation." Grace stood up, slowly, confidently, without drama. "Listen," she said, "I've spent my whole life being the wrong presentation. My back, my nose, my eyes. None of it fit your covers. And suddenly, I'm a trend. But you know what's going to outlast the trend? Me. The one without filters, the one who doesn't straighten her hair, doesn't slim her cheeks, and doesn't erase the shadows under her eyes. You want my truth, but with gloss. And I only give truth, the whole thing." Silence fell, not offended silence, but new. The kind where someone who's used to dictating is suddenly forced to listen. The editor slowly nodded. "All right, then no makeup, then no retouching, then, as is, you set the terms. We're just lucky you came." The shoot took place in an old theater. No decorations, just bare brick walls, soft diffused light. The first photo, in that same blue dress. The second, in the plaid shirt she wore in high school. The third, without clothes, just shoulders, just a face, just her, and the caption on the first page. "She doesn't fit in, but she's the one reshaping the frame." The internet exploded. Some wrote, "Where's the retouch? Where's the makeup? What is this standard breaking nonsense?" Others, "For the first time, I see a person on a cover, not a mask. And for the first time, I don't feel worse looking at a magazine face." And then came the most important thing, a letter, handwritten, on yellow paper. "I've been a model for 20 years. I've been on a 14 covers. I don't know what my face looks like without corrections. But you reminded me what it's like to feel alive. Thank you for not becoming convenient. You made all of us real again, even those who had forgotten how to be ourselves. Grace held the letter for a long time, then placed it into her notebook, between pages where she once wrote poetry, hid from the world. Now she knew. They tried to change her, but they changed instead, because authenticity cannot be trained. It can only be heard. And if you're lucky, learned from. Grace was invited to a meeting with representatives of a major cosmetics brand, one of those whose billboards hang in airports, whose ads play before movies, and whose packaging is in every other woman's bag. "We like you," said the man in the expensive blazer, not making eye contact. "You've got the vibe of a new era. Authenticity, trust, psychological closeness. People see themselves in you. It works. It's valuable. It sells." He paused. "But there's a nuance. Nuance. A word used when they don't want to say you're a problem, but that's exactly what they mean. You don't fit our core message. Inner glow highlighted by perfection. We're focused on gloss, on skin like porcelain, on a gaze that glides across a face and doesn't get caught on imperfections." He pulled out a tablet and showed her photo. "This is beautiful, but uneven. Too honest. We need to inspire, not unsettle. Sorry, you're not about sales. You're about feelings." Grace sat calmly. She already knew, in a world where everything is measured in numbers, the soul doesn't have a KPI. And yet, she replied, "But isn't a feeling exactly why someone opens their wallet?" He fell silent for a second. Then, with practiced indifference, he said, "Unfortunately, not in our policy." 2 months later, their new ad campaign launched. On billboards, a perfect face, flat glossy, edited beyond recognition. On screen, the phrase, "Be the best version of yourself." And in the comments below the video, "Is this another reminder that I'm not good enough? Where's the reality? Can I just see someone who looks like me?" And suddenly someone posted an old photo of Grace from the theater shoot, in the blue dress with a clear living face, captioned, "This is the best version of yourself, without enhancements." The post went viral, first among followers, then among journalists, then among regular people tired of fabricated standards. And then something unexpected began. People started writing to the brand, hundreds of letters, comments, videos. "Where is she? Why didn't you choose her? Why always retouching, never truth?" At a branding and marketing conference, the CEO of that brand took the stage and said, "We failed the campaign, not because the product is bad, but because people no longer want to see perfection. They want to see real emotion." On the screen behind him, a photo of Grace, and the caption, "Her face didn't sell. It made people feel." And we miss that. At that moment, Grace was sitting at home, drinking ginger tea and rereading letters. One of them, from an older woman with a photo of her daughter. She doesn't leave her room. They bullied her in school. She hates her reflection, until she saw you and said, "Mom, if she can, maybe I can too." Thank you, Grace. You're not just beautiful. You give permission to live. And in that moment, Grace understood. Sometimes you don't fit a campaign. Sometimes you don't get bought. Sometimes you're not even understood. But if your face doesn't sell and instead makes people feel, you're no longer a model. You're a mirror, and it may not reflect gloss, but it reflects the truth. The invitation came unexpectedly, a card on thick paper with gold embossing in a cream envelope. Fashion Voice Awards, invitation to the gala evening, Los Angeles, 7 p.m., black tie, RSVP. Grace looked at it for a long time, not with excitement, not with anxiety, but with that particular expression you wear when you already know the price of such gestures. All of it, people, lights, flashes, cliches, status, she now saw through it. But she decided to go, not to prove anything, just to show up, silently. She arrived alone. The taxi stopped in front of the building with a mirrored glass facade, and along the red carpet walked people whose faces the world knew not by their eyes, but by logos. Grace didn't hire a stylist, didn't have a dress custom made. She came in a dress she made herself, simple, straight, black. No cuts, no embellishments, with only one detail. The fabric on the shoulders was hand embroidered with thread she brought from home. At the entrance, they didn't recognize her. Press? The guard asked. Number Grace Ellery. Invited guest. He flipped through the list, and when he saw the name, he looked surprised. That's you. Really? She nodded and walked in. The hall was filled with a soft hum, glitter, perfume, champagne glasses, and phrases from a world ruled by presentations, contracts, and facades. No one photographed her. At first, they simply didn't recognize her. Then, because they didn't dare, she wasn't done up, no event-ready hairstyle, no makeup, no pose. But that very thing made people stare, because her face held no desire to please, and that was both intimidating and captivating. One of the guests, an actress with a perfect smile, whispered, "Is that her?" "Who?" "The one with the face that doesn't sell." "She's strange, not photogenic, but I can't stop looking at her." When she approached the table marked panel participants, the organizer was clearly flustered. "Sorry, you?" "Yes," she said calmly. "I'm on the program." "It's just, you don't look like anyone else, that's true." He hesitated. "Would you like us to move you closer to the edge?" "Number, I'd like to sit in the center, as should those who were long pushed to the margins." On stage, during the speech portion, the microphone passed from one fashionable mouth to another. Everyone spoke of the future of the industry, of values, of authenticity. But it all sounded like presentations until she spoke. "I'm not going to read a speech, I'll just say one thing." She looked at the audience, at hundreds of faces covered in makeup, showing interest but not feeling. "I'm not here because I became someone. I'm here because I stopped hiding. Am not the new beauty. I'm the old truth, the one you were taught to look away from, not because it's ugly, but because it's inconvenient. I'm not in couture because my body doesn't want to be tailored. I don't speak how you're supposed to, I speak how it is. And if someone hearing me suddenly thinks, then maybe I can be myself too, then all of this had a purpose." The hall went silent, not out of admiration, but because there was nothing left to say. Popularity is a strange thing. Grace wasn't on magazine covers every month. Paparazzi didn't snap her coming out of cafes. She didn't do photo shoots in pools with golden balloons or post morning selfies with perfectly styled hair. But more and more often, in the most unexpected places, people approached her. Once, in a pharmacy, a girl about 16, nervous, fingers trembling. "I'm sorry, can I just say something? You, when you smiled in that interview, I was sitting at home, crying. I thought I'd never be able to be myself. And then you smiled, not like a winner, like you'd hurt too. And I suddenly thought, if she can be like that, maybe I can too." Another time, outside the library, a woman, scarf on her head, no eyebrows, after chemotherapy, composed, confident, but her eyes, an ocean. "My daughter showed me your photo. She said, 'Mom, she looks like you when you smile.' I hadn't smiled in 6 months, and then I looked and realized I'm still here, just not in the same shape I used to be. Thank you for not reshaping yourself. Otherwise, I wouldn't have believed." She never quite knew how to respond. "Thank you" felt too small. "I really appreciate it." Too generic. "I'm just being myself" sounded arrogant. She simply smiled, and every time she did, it felt like someone nearby stopped being afraid of themselves for the first time. Marketers still struggled. "She doesn't sell. She doesn't have influencer presence. Her face doesn't work for a giant billboard," but underneath, in the comments on every post she appeared in, it was always the same. "I look at her and stop comparing myself. Can't explain it, but her face creates silence inside. I just want to hug her, like someone's there who gets it." At an open event for teenagers, where she was invited to read a piece about self-acceptance, she came on stage without fanfare. The room was full of ordinary girls, the kind who don't get cast in shows, who don't get invited to parties, who don't get likes on social media. Grace stepped up, in a regular shirt, no makeup, hair in a bun. In the hall, no applause, just quiet, intent stares. She said, "You know, people often tell me I give hope, but I'm not a cure. I just endured, not being convenient. I lived through phrases like, 'You're not pretty, but you're sweet. You're cute, but odd. You're not ugly, just off type.' And you know what? Every time I heard a but, inside I said to myself, I am, and I am, and sensitive. I am, and strong. I am, and real. I'm not but, I'm all of it, just like you." And in the moment she smiled, the girl in the back, the one with dull eyes and acne-covered skin, suddenly started crying. But not with shame, because for the first time in her presence, crying didn't feel like weakness. It felt like permission. After that event, Grace didn't become a talk show sensation, but every girl who needed not a guide on how to be pretty, but permission to be herself, saved that video. And now, wherever she appeared, in a coffee shop, on the street, in a supermarket, people didn't rush for autographs. They just looked, sometimes with a lump in their throat, sometimes with quiet respect, and sometimes they'd approach, touch her hand, and smile. And she knew. This was the real victory. Not when people recognize you, but when next to you they stop hating themselves. They name the collection Grace Point, not glamour, not the voice of a new generation, not even the muse of new fashion, just a point of origin, a word from which a new perspective begins, a new step, a new understanding. We create clothing that doesn't emphasize the body but the person, explained the designer at the press conference. Not silhouette, but essence. Not trends, but honesty. Everyone knew she was the inspiration, not because she looked like a model, but because she didn't. They wanted to stage a grand show in Milan, a hall with mirrors, an orchestra, color, light play, drones. But Grace declined. "Thank you. It's important. It's beautiful. But let it be different. Let fashion, for once, go where it's not expected." So they held the show in a rehabilitation center where girls were recovering after surgeries, after anorexia, after burns, after trying too long to fit into a world that for too long had said, "You're not enough." The hall was simple: chairs, plastic, music, live but soft, clothes, loose, gentle, not focused on shape, on the runway, not models, but those who once were afraid to even look in the mirror. And when the first girl walked out, unsteady, with thin arms and a gaze full of fear, and the audience didn't gasp, didn't perform applause, but simply accepted, she straightened her shoulders. Because for the first time, people looked at her not to judge, but to understand. Grace sat off to the side, not in the center, not in the front row. She sat holding the hand of a girl in a wheelchair who had dreamed of walking the runway but couldn't. "You're not walking the runway," she said, "but you're the reason it exists." After the show, a well-known fashion critic wrote, "I don't know how to describe it. There was no sparkle, no hype, but there was a moment when I saw my daughter, and I realized I'd never told her she was beautiful simply because she's alive." And Grace did that, not with words. With presence. She didn't become a star, but she became the point from which I began speaking to the world differently. Later, when the designer received a prestigious award, he stepped on stage and said, "I didn't receive this award for fabric or silhouette. I received it because one girl once refused to be called non-standard, and instead of asking for approval, she became herself, loudly, so loudly even those who had long stopped listening heard." He turned to the audience. "Grace, I don't know if you hear me now, but if you're somewhere near, know this. You didn't just inspire a collection, you became a beginning. You're the point of origin, not in fashion, in how people see others, and how, for the first time, they begin to see themselves." She heard it, sitting at home in her favorite chair, with a blanket and a cup of tea. She didn't post a story, didn't record a thank you video, didn't upload a selfie with the caption, "I'm proud." She just smiled and whispered to herself, "I never wanted to be the center. I just wanted everyone to have a chance to be themselves. If that happened for even one person, then I wasn't too ugly to begin with for nothing." Years passed. Grace left the public eye as quietly as she had entered it. No grand farewells, no new chapter posts on social media, no monetizing her authenticity. She simply stopped giving interviews, stopped doing photo shoots, stopped explaining. When people asked where she was, the answers varied. "I think she works at an art school for girls." "She moved somewhere in Oregon, runs a photography club." "She helps women after plastic surgeries." She just disappeared. But it wasn't disappearance. It was a return to herself. One day, in a small bookstore on the outskirts of Seattle, a girl opened a photo book. On the cover, a portrait. Black and white, a woman's face, not young, not classic, a face with deep wrinkles, a scar by the lips, sadness in the corners of the eyes, and the caption, "Grace." Not the idea of beauty, the truth of being. The book became a bestseller. Without ads, without launches, people passed it hand to hand, opened it to a random page, and paused. Because on every spread, there were faces, not models, not actresses, women, with names, with stories, with eyes full of life. And at the end, a short line, "I chose to be myself." Because once, she chose it too. Her face became a symbol, but not a brand, not a logo. It began to appear on the wall of a rehabilitation center, in a school textbook on self-esteem and acceptance, in an anti-bullying campaign, in the logo of a foundation helping girls who had been bullied. And everywhere, it wasn't labeled the face of Grace Ellery, but rather the face that helped others not turn away from themselves. One day, a student in Paris was giving a presentation on the image of beauty and its evolution. On the screen, she showed images: Marilyn Monroe, Kate Moss, Bella Hadid, and then Grace's face without makeup, in simple light, and said, "This is not an era. This is not a trend. This is hope. Hope that you can exist without why, without if only, just exist." Now Grace lives in a small house by a lake. She grows mint, writes in a notebook. Once a month, she holds sessions for girls who think they are not beautiful. She doesn't heal them. She doesn't inspire. She simply is there. Sometimes she stops by with tea. Sometimes photographs their hands, or neck, or eyes, and says, "Look, this is you, just like this, and already real." Her photo is no longer on billboards, but in the hearts of those who stopped fearing the mirror, it remains forever. Not as an icon, but as an answer to the most important question: can you be yourself and not be afraid? Yes, because she was the first to smile at the world, without asking if it was ready to smile back. Now her face is not a trend. It is not a revolution. It is hope.